Hello, everyone. Welcome. A few people trickling in. Um, Great. Okay. Thanks for everyone for joining us online today for our webinar on community benefits in construction. My name is Charlotte Luthwaite. I'm the manager of community benefits and partnerships at Social Canada. I work pretty hands-on with community benefit agreements, community benefits in general, and trying to integrate them into construction, infrastructure, and development projects. I am joined by my colleague M on the call. They will be helping with all the behind the scenes tech components. So if you have any tech issues, just directly message M and they will help you navigate those. For those of you that don't know, Social Canada is a social enterprise that works across Canada, working to create healthy communities through social procurement and community benefit agreements. Today, we're just going to be focusing on community benefit agreements, but we have a broad offering of services and work that we do to try to create more value in our supply chain and for our communities. So please, I implore you to sign up for our newsletter and check out our website because we have a lot of free resources online, not just the ones that we're going to be sharing today. So on that note, let's get started. The plan for today is I'm going to present and talk about our new free resource, which is our guide to community benefits in construction. And then we'll talk a little bit about something we've been working on that we're really excited about, which is the Social Canada Community Benefits in Construction Standard. And then we will move to a panel with some great participants and speakers that are going to pull from their own experience designing, mandating, and implementing community benefit agreements across Canada. Okay. So let's start with the guide. Over the last few months, we've been working on this free guide, the Community Benefits in Construction guidelines. We have drawn over 10 years of experience from Social Canada across Canada to put together this resource because we kind of recognized with increasing interest and need, there was a need to compile our recommendations and guidelines to create community benefits in construction. If we back up a little bit before we get into the guide, what are community benefits in construction? Construction, infrastructure, and development projects affect more than just the physical shape of our communities, just the physical capital. These projects must consider their relationship and impact on community capital, which includes not only that physical capital, the literal buildings that we're creating, but also social, human, cultural, and economic capital. Construction projects impact local economies and labor markets, whether they're intended to or not. So if these impacts are considered with positive intention, like with a community benefit agreement, the projects bring the opportunity to create long-lasting economic and social benefits for the communities in which they occur. So the process of implementing community benefits in construction and infrastructure projects is often undertaken via a community benefit agreement. For those that are definition minded, this is the Social Canada definition for community benefit agreements. We do recognize that CBAs, as they're also called, are not the only delivery model for community benefits in construction, but in the guide and our work, we often refer to CBA as the term for the delivery of community benefits in construction broadly. So this is the definition for CBAs. It's a legal agreement or a contractual requirement on construction, infrastructure, and development projects for specific social value outcomes like hiring, training, or procurement that ensures projects enhance social, cultural, environmental, and economic opportunities for and with community. So that kind of encapsulates everything we're trying to achieve with a nice bow and a nice definition. When we talk about the social value outcomes, the community benefit outcomes from these types of projects, the most common outcomes or benefits that we see are identified are through targeted employment, training and apprenticeships, the inclusion of social value suppliers as subcontractors or businesses in the supply chain, and community development more broadly. And when we were designing the guide, the whole idea of these benefits, community benefits in construction, is to create those kinds of outcomes. So the guide aims to support community advocates, policymakers, and project owners who want to create those community benefits, those outcomes in construction. And so the guide brings readers through three stages of this process. There's the mandate, design, and implement phases. What does mandate mean? So community benefits can include mandates from lots of different sources. A mandate is the authority to carry out a policy or course of action that directs the inclusion of community benefits. Community benefits can be included in public sector projects, such as the development of a park or municipal land, or in private sector projects, such as the development of condos or on private land owned by a corporation or nonprofit. We identified three types of mandate sources. So there's a policy or framework. There's mandate source through bid requirements or through negotiations. A CBA framework or policy provides the overarching structure and mandate to include community benefits on construction projects. The city of Vancouver, for example, has a community benefit agreements policy that applies to large-scale developments across the city with floor plans over 45,000 square meters. So that's an example of CBAs being mandated through a policy or a framework. CBAs can also be mandated by the project owner through bid requirements during the contract procurement process. Bid requirements can be included on projects independently of or derived from a framework or policy to ensure community benefits on individual projects or developments. An example of this is the city of Winnipeg. They passed a motion through City Council to include community benefit requirements on future tenders for the North End Water Pollution Control Center. CBAs can be negotiated as part of the approval of new development or infrastructure projects. Typically, negotiations are driven by community advocacy. A high-profile example of this is the Los Angeles Staples Center. There was a CBA and community benefits mandated on this project. The community coalition that negotiated the CBA consisted of more than 20 organizations. The CBA contains commitments relating to a broad range of issues, including affordable housing, parks and open spaces, local hiring, and living wages. So these are the three main mandate sources for CBAs. The process to engage, determine, and incorporate appropriate community benefit goals and targets is the design phase of CBAs. So the following design elements can be established in a CBA policy or framework and applied across multiple projects, or can be designed on an individual project by project basis through bid requirements or negotiations. The main design components that are required of a CBA through our experience are engagement, the applicability of the CBA, who does it apply to, what types of projects does it apply to, determining targets, determining what the bid process looks like and how that language is included, accountability measures and compliance measurements, and reporting. Who is reported to and how frequently, and is the reporting public? Implementation is the kind of final stage of the guide that we go through. So implementation includes all the activities and processes that are needed for community benefits to be realized. This includes training, reporting, community engagement, supplier outreach, and a communications plan to communicate what is happening on the project. We'll dive into a little bit about community engagement. So a common method for CBA community engagement is via regular meetings or roundtables with community stakeholders and those executing the CBA. This is often facilitated via a CBN, or a community benefits network. There's examples of this across the country. Exchange Intercity hosts the CBN in Vancouver. There are CBNs in Peel and in Toronto, and many more. So this may seem like a lot, this guide to community benefits. We, as Bisocial Canada, provide supports for the design and the implementation and the design of the mandate for community benefit agreements. We kind of encapsulate this role as a community benefits liaison. So it's a specific role, and it supports in the successful design of community benefits on a project. We have really seen having a dedicated internal or external resource person ensures that community benefits do not fall off the side of someone's desk. And the project team has the support and expertise needed to achieve the community benefits targets. Please reach out if you have any questions about what support looks like from a community benefits liaison, both internally in your organization and externally through Bisocial Canada, because we have a lot of experience acting as the community benefits liaison and designing the role of the community benefits liaison. So what is our experience? I really wanted to touch on where we're drawing this information from and what experiences we drew on to create the guide. I'm going to talk about two, one through the city of Vancouver and one CBA through the city of Surrey. So an active community benefit agreement project is the new St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver. Bisocial Canada has been the independent third-party monitor, which is the city of Vancouver's name for the role that is similar to a community benefits liaison since 2021. The hospital is owned by Providence Healthcare, and PCL Construction is the general contractor on the project. Construction of the new hospital and learning campus began in 2021, and the project has a budget of over $2 billion. There's been a lot of learnings from this project specifically because of the scale and the expertise that's involved in building a hospital. It's also been a highly public and important project because it's adjacent to the Vancouver's downtown east side, which is an area facing many complex challenges in terms of employment and economic development. The other project that we have worked on that we'd like to feature is the Coastal Flood Adaptation Projects through the city of Surrey. It had a community employment benefit requirement on 13 projects across 8 years. So Bisocial Canada worked with the city to conduct stakeholder engagement and market capacity research, which informed the setting of targets. So what we found was they wanted to set the target of employment hours at about 20 to 30%, which seems really high. But because of the market research, the demographics of Surrey were quite diverse, we learned quite early on. So we set our targets for equity deserving groups quite high, to about 20 or 30%. And for social procurement, they were looking for 50% of the contract spend to be going towards their procurement targets. We also worked to develop all the reporting tools on these projects. So overall, we encourage readers to start small and be prepared to learn and adapt when mandating, designing, and implementing community benefit agreements. Even the smallest actions can ripple into meaningful change within our communities. So please look through the guide. It's on our website for free to download and share. It goes through all of the stages of mandate, design, and implement, and all the activities involved in each of those stages for implementing community benefit agreements. Okay, so I'm just gonna check the chat to see if there's any questions. Okay, so the guide came out a few months ago, but what is new and what you can kind of expect from Bisocial Canada in the coming months is a new resource initiative, which is called Community Benefits and Construction Standard. We are working to standardize the process and outcomes of community benefit implementation across Canada. So we've taken what we've outlined in the guide to create an objective evaluation method. The key to this standard is that we're looking at not just the outcomes of projects, but also the processes, and we're evaluating all of those pieces that go into the successful community benefit agreements. The goal of the standard is to create shared expectations, processes, and terminologies across projects to create a consistent model and process for us to be able to compare projects and ensure success. Things that motivate the community benefits construction standard is to create a standard that prevents social washing, that allows us to compare the outcomes across projects, motivates project owners to exceed the basic targets and look into their processes as an organization and align them with the outcomes of the community benefit projects. It also allows us to provide acknowledgement for projects that deliver substantial community benefits that are, compared to other projects. Why they use a standard? We really think that our standard promotes long-term sustainability through increased resilience and preparedness. The standardization of process and outcomes can reduce costs through effective management and stakeholder cooperation. With a standard and expertise, we hope to minimize negative impacts on community and maximize positive impacts. There's the potential for saving money for project owners over time through increased efficiency. So we're not redesigning the wheel each time. We've got a roadmap for what works and how to achieve successful outcomes. The standard is a third-party evaluation system which provides credibility. So there are processes for verification and due diligence of certifications and processes and reporting. We also look to boost public confidence and encourage greater community involvement in decision making. And that's a really important process piece that is included in the standard and will be evaluated. So, how are we planning on evaluating these things? Well, the Biosocial Canada Community Benefits Construction Standard, I know a bit of a mouthful, looks to outline mandatory and optional activities, which reflect over 10 years of our experience. The standard is a points-based evaluation matrix aimed to measure the performance of projects against both outcome and process-driven deliverables. So there are activities that are required or optional with points. So projects have the opportunity to meet a basic standard and then to exceed the standard in other areas in a points-based system. These are the pieces of the evaluation matrix. So what we are outlining and asking for from projects. So we've got the activity. So an activity is a specific item that must be designed, implemented, or reported on. Each activity can be broken down into assessment areas with assessment deliverables to determine evaluation for the standard. The assessment area is the component of the activity that will be assessed, either as a requirement or for points. The assessment deliverable are tangible items that provide verification and process due diligence for an assessment area, again, either as a requirement or for points. So an example of this is to say the activity is to conduct community engagement. And the assessment area would be, the diversity of those in attendance and the feedback and the summary report. And the deliverable would be a list of participants and the documents of the presentation and the engagement. And again, each of these pieces are either determined required or optional. So there's a baseline requirements that are needed to meet the standard. And then there are optional to be able to go above and beyond. The standard identifies 3 distinct project scopes that all the activities are categorized within. So there are processes that are required in the design phase. There are processes and activities required in the implementation phase. And there are processes and outcomes required in the reporting phase. So in scope one in the design scope, these are kind of the categories of activities that we've identified. This scope occurs before construction begins or in the pre-construction phase, as it's sometimes referred to. Kind of overarching goal of the design scope is to welcome stakeholders to the project in the concept of community benefits, collect all necessary information to design measurement tools and processes, and determine how the project will remain accountable to its. So this is a lot of engagement and design and learning and really setting the project on the right foot for when shovels hit the ground, we can really implement and we aren't working backwards from, you know, once the project has already started. And when you try to start to design things, that's usually when we've seen in our experience some hiccups. So it's really important to get ahead of things and set the stage for successful implementation. The second scope of the standard is implement. So this scope occurs during active construction. The overarching goal, again, of this scope is to implement, is to continue to welcome new reporting parties to the project. So you see introduction and onboarding again is still included in the implementation. Disseminate tools and templates, consistently collect accurate data, and outreach to employment agencies, suppliers, and community. This is kind of visualized as a circular process. So these things are consistently happening throughout the implementation stage of the community benefit agreement. There are parties consistently being onboarded onto the project as new subtrades come on board and are welcomed into the CBA. There is consistent reporting happening throughout the project to make sure that we're on track. And there is consistent outreach happening to community, to suppliers, and to employment agencies to ensure that opportunities are really identified and achieved and aligned with the right resources. The third scope of the Bi-Social Canada Community Benefits in Construction standard is to report. So this scope occurs during active construction and post-construction. The report scope aims to aggregate and share data. The data will form the basis for discussions on project outcomes, learnings, and challenges. Through these discussions, there will be opportunity for continuous learning and for stakeholders to work on improving project opportunities and outcomes. Again, this is working in a circular motion as well. So we recommend there to be sub-annual reporting in capacities like working groups. And so this is how we really keep an eye on how the project is progressing and identify challenges and successes and how to address them. And then we have annual and final reporting. So annual reporting, as you know, projects often last longer than a year. So there's multiple annual reports and then final reports. So these are activities that are kind of continuously happening and being evaluated. We do not have the standard yet. It is coming. So please look out for more information coming this fall on the standard and how to get your project involved in becoming a Bi-Social Canada standard community benefits project. Okay, so I have talked long enough. I'm going to invite some of our panelists to help me share the speaking space. Wonderful. Okay, I am going to allow them to introduce themselves and then we'll launch into the panel. Tim, would you like to go first?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. My name is Tim Coldwell. I am the president and CEO of ENSCA Advisors. We are Canada's first Indigenous project governance and leadership practice. So we focus on working with First Nations and public owners on delivering community infrastructure. And I'm a walking, talking example of what happens when you engage with social procurement. I would not be where I am today if I wasn't given a chance by Chandos Construction, the organization that I was president of for almost a decade. And I just think it's transformative. And I think that it should be baked into almost every project that we do. And so every project that ENSCA does, we implement social procurement, and we implement voluntary CBAs and demonstrate zero premium capital costs for doing that. So great to be here. Would love to have more conversation.
Great. Thanks, Tim. And Marcia, do you want to introduce yourself to members?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Marcia Nozick. I'm the founder and the CEO of Embers and Embers Staffing, which is a social enterprise, a temporary employment agency in the construction industry, serving the construction. So we provide, workers everything from general laborers to, ticketed tradespeople, hoist operators, CSOs, etc. But we're different than your typical staffing company in that we operate on a not-for-profit basis as a charity. So our mandate, our mission is to help people who are facing barriers to employment to connect with work and to advance in their careers. And basically, we're helping people who are starting over in life, immigrants, Indigenous people, people getting back into the workforce after a life setback, that type of thing. And as a social enterprise, 100% of our profits are reinvested back into our workers themselves. So we provide, higher wages, certified training, boots and equipment, medical and dental benefits, counseling. We even have a match savings program. We have lunches for people to take. So we're trying to reduce any obstacles to getting onto a job site. And when a company like hires through Embers, and this is like with social procurement, it's a shout out to this. You're getting double your value, maybe more than double your value. You get your staffing needs met, which you need to do anyways, and at the same time, you really are helping to turn someone's life around. And when you turn one person's life around, you're turning there's a spiral effect. You're changing the community really. We've worked on 5 CBAs already over the last number of years. Some have worked really well. Others, so there are some challenges, and so we can talk about that. We have 4 locations. 3, like we have the Lower Mainland, the Valley here. We have a location in Surrey. We have our biggest location is Vancouver, and we also are operating out of Edmonton as well. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Marcia and Jordan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jordan Sterling. I'm with Delnor Construction in Edmonton. I'm a project manager. We are a general contractor. We do a lot of public work as well as private work, schools, churches, rec centers. And then we've done a number of CBAs and a lot of Indigenous work around Alberta and area. So I'm happy to be here and excited to go into some CBA examples as we go forward.
Thanks, Jordan. And thanks for the segue. So let's kind of set the scene here. If we can talk about what your experience are with CBAs, and if we can talk about some of the challenges and successes that you've seen in your own work, I think that would be really valuable. Marcia, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So I think when we first started, I think on our first CBA, there was a strong belief that from the site supervisors and that the quality of the workers that we might send to the sites would be not your best. And that's because there's, you're a nonprofit organization serving people in the community, and there's a sort of a stigma attached. They're worried about who you're going to send. And yet our experience has been, once we got engaged with these companies, that they found that the service and the workers were really better quality than what's out there in the competition. I mean, these are people who are very motivated to prove themselves. They're working with a company that wants them to get ahead, knows them, is providing them with a lot of support. So it's actually a better fit. So 2 things I think I just want to say have made things work really, really well. One is a buy-in, and necessary buy-in and a commitment at the very top level. Very, very important. The owners, VPs, you need the champion that will convey the message and the mandate and the mission to the people who are working at the site levels, who really have other priorities. They have to get their jobs done on time, within cost and all that. So there has to be that communication from the top down. And these are large projects generally, so you can get the message can get lost in the mix. In one instance, we had the owner who brought into a room all the project managers, all of the site supervisors, everybody that, and said to them, you know, from here forward, the only organization we're going to be working with for outsourcing labor is Embers. And there was like, oh no, nobody wanted to be told what to do and all that. But the owner said, that's it. That's the story. And what's happened is that, you know, they discovered, you know, through experience that we provided the best quality workers and really top-notch service. They could call at any time and say, we have a problem, or even a problem with a worker. Like we've been able to work together. And so 12 years later, we're still working with this company and we're their exclusive providers. And that's happened with every CBA that we've been involved with. So, and the other thing really important, you mentioned it before, Charlotte, is having an internal, an inside coordinator, not like the by social outside, but somebody who from the construction industry that's hired by the general contractor to coordinate and liaise, because they can iron out the bumps in the road. They can talk to the subcontractors, they can talk to the community, they can, and they're on a daily basis making those connections. They make the introductions, things that we can't do ourselves. So I think with the Park Casino project had such coordinator, highly successful, made it work really, really well. And if I have one more thing to say, I want to talk about the challenges, and then I'll shut up. I have found that in some cases, even more recently, that the targets, the definition of the targets have not aligned really with community needs. And I think there's a language now, and I'm just going to put this out there. There's a language now that we talk about equity deserving groups. And it's a very broad definition that doesn't necessarily get to the people who are most disadvantaged. Like you mentioned in Surrey and in Vancouver, the complexion of a construction site includes all kinds of people who, you know, are not necessarily white. So, but that doesn't mean that they're all disadvantaged economically or in other ways. And it's important to work with the communities themselves, the community groups, to get there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a lot of importance with aligning what the outcomes are, the goals for outcomes are with the community that the development is actually happening in. Speaking of internal champions and top-down mandate, Tim, do you want to speak to your experience with CBAs and what that's been like to mandate that across an organization?
Yeah, I would say, and there's so many different ways I could go here, but I would say the single biggest thing to focus on if you're mandating a CBA across a relatively large organization, and you're saying to your staff, I want to partner with Embers or other groups, you can't lead with like a checkboxy definitions driven policy wonk way of being. You have to lead with heart and soul. So you have to talk about how you're transforming the lives of people, right? And so at the top of this, I mentioned that I'm an example of what happens. I could have been in a cardboard box on the street, and Chandos Construction gave me a job when I was 17 years old. I had crappy grades, I had a good attitude, and I would work hard. I had all sorts of challenges, but they saw something in me and they gave me an opportunity. And it's been my experience that when you give people in need a helping hand, they will work circles around anyone else that you're going to hire that feels entitled and that they deserve a job as a laborer or a carpenter or whatever. Um, and so finding those people who just like pop when you give them an opportunity, I think is a really big conversation in all of this. And then you have to tell their story about how they were on the street and how, with positive adult role models, with a living wage at 20 some bucks an hour to start, you put them in the apprenticeship program. In Toronto, carpenters make 55 bucks an hour straight time. You can lift people from poverty in a matter of years and transform their life. And it's not just them, it's their family, it's their children, it's future generations. And you got to lead with that as opposed to we're shoving this policy down your throat.
Yeah, yeah, even now just hearing that, and I've heard this story just again, just feels impactful. Um, speaking of getting collaborative buy-in, Jordan, you're working on an IPD delivery model with community benefit targets. You want to speak to some of your past experience and how that project is going currently?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it ties in perfectly with kind of what Marcia and Tim were talking through there, and we have some examples of Head Start projects with Indigenous groups. Kichikayaski was a very recent project where it was kind of like Marcia said, we had that internal champion, and we were able to hit the ground running and move forward with it. We got early involvement from the stakeholders. We were able to implement all the spiritual and traditional ceremonies and traditions that the nation wanted, and we tied into the local labor. And like we've alluded to, a lot of those, once given the opportunity, they run circles around the staff that sometimes work on these types of projects. And so we were actually able to offer 3 positions after 2 years of work on the projects to these individuals. And whether or not they take them is a different story, but the opportunity that was presented and the ability for us to actually work and find these individuals that we wouldn't have otherwise found was a huge success with those examples of the CBA. And then, Charlotte, to what you're talking about, recently here with the City of Edmonton, those were past experiences, and this is a future and current experience is through the City of Edmonton on the Ambleside integrated site. It's an IPD job, and we're working directly with Bisocial and the city in order to, we kind of talked about the targets and the baselines and the standardization, and so we're trying to work through that. And I think it's been a great start. We've, like you said, Marcia, we're trying to really dive into what are the equity deserving groups, what are those definitions, what are the targets. And so we've been working on setting those. We've got kind of our platform and our process, and now we're working on actually, I don't know if it's step 2 or 3, Charlotte, of your process there, but we're actually into the construction and the reporting, and it's our second month now, and it seems to be going great. So we're super excited about it, and I think it just speaks to how important this all is.
Yeah, and I think what that process is really, if I'm reflecting on the design phase almost of it, when we talk about the standardization, we talk about our guide and all of our experiences, we really focused on getting buy-in of everyone, and everyone was using the same language, understood the process, and understood, what was the goal, what's the story here that we are trying to promote, to speak to Tim's experience, and what is the impact here, beyond just the targets and the reporting. And so that was a huge focus that we put a lot of emphasis on. And I think it's really started to show in terms of the attitude of the whole project and all the partners in achieving these outcomes, not just on paper, but also in spirit. So if we can kind of tie this a little bit into some of our work around standardization, I know, Jordan, you talked about how, we're trying to set a due process for how we are achieving these outcomes. In your view, how could community benefits projects benefit from an industry standardization? So, kind of like a cross-project standardization of process and outcomes. So, I want to jump
For sure.
in. Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
absolutely. Yeah, we did spend a lot of time working through what standardizing that looks like, and I think there is a huge benefit because standardizing targets might not be necessarily the right way to go, but standardizing the process is absolutely something that we can do. And so that's where we pulled in, like you mentioned, 10 plus stakeholders across different scopes of work, consulting, construction, ownership, and try to bring in that process, and standardizing it just helps us hit the ground running across any project. The process is very similar. It's the targets that are project specific and job specific. And so that's where I think this process and where we're going with this is extremely important. And that's what we're trying to help not only the city of Edmonton, but the entire industry with that standardization.
Great.
I can,
Anyone
yeah,
else?
I
Yeah,
can jump in
Tim.
on that. Yeah, I totally agree with what Jordan is saying. Say you can achieve X impact, however you measure that on project A. Just because you can do that on that project in a certain geography does not mean that you can do the same thing on a different project in a different geography. The social enterprise ecosystems are different depending on where you are. The capabilities of the market are different. And so the key there is to assess opportunities for impact collectively with the project team and then come up with a target that's tailored for that team and that project. But you have to have people bought in. And so I guess a comment that I'd make that's related to that is it is pretty much impossible to do what I just described about work with a team about what is possible for impact when you're doing a hard bid CCDC2 race to the bottom delivery method. And I get to say this, I'm out of the construction industry now, so I don't have a dog in this fight, but that the impact that you'll get off of a hard bid CCDC2 delivery method is probably a tenth of what you would get off of a CM at risk, IPD, or progressive design build. Because those three delivery methods allow you to engage with the contractors, the subcontractors, the social enterprises, the supply chain, and you can engage with them before you design the project. And then what you can do is you can design work packages that are custom tailored to the capabilities of the social enterprise ecosystem. And so when you do that, that's how you really unlock the kind of next level impact in my mind. Anyways, and then last comment I'd make in terms of the benefit of standardizing this, I think there's always, when you move something forward in a market, there's always horror stories about a project gone wrong. Okay. That doesn't mean that what we're doing is inherently flawed. And very often means that that project was done incorrectly. And so setting out this is how you do it properly sort of playbook, I think is very important as a starting point for people who are new to the journey. And then what you can do when you have kind of a standard, you can baseline it, you can measure it, and you can see how you're moving a broader chunk of the industry forward through that. So I think this idea of having a kind of a playbook with a baseline is very powerful.
Right.
Yeah.
Marcia, you're nodding your head. Do you want to speak to as far as the social enterprise perspective?
Well, I would just say a couple of points. I just I'm concurring with what's been said already. I think we can standardize the processes and the procedures to an extent. And I think what this does, it helps to legitimize the sector. I think that's a very important point. And yeah, and I think also it simplifies things for people, right? It's creating a roadmap, and although that's really positive, it gets everybody going in the same direction so that we're not talking at odds with each other. And I think that that's the thing. You're creating a foundation that everybody understands and a bit of a roadmap there. But I also just want to say the local, in a social enterprise, we find this in our business. I mean, there are certain things that we can do, our IT and different things can be standardized. But when it comes to the communities themselves, they're local by definition, and they're quite unique. And so you really got to be careful about that. And I guess like what Jordan said, maybe don't standardized targets, because it's quite unique in each community. And I think it's really, I don't know how you can do this, but if you can, in some way, we talked earlier about the spirit of the community benefit agreement. Somehow, if that can be ingrained in the processes or infused in the day-to-day hiring decisions in the construction industry, somehow that would be really helpful, because it is like Tim said, it is so much about buying into it. When you say standards, when people meet, there's a tendency to, well, we've met the standards, and we don't want to do that, because that's really lowballing it. There's so much more. The standards we create are very low anyways, and so that's not a great measure. In a way, you really want to see people striving above and to really meet the needs of the community, and that, that's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, and I think that's, when we emphasize standardization of process, because oftentimes it's standardization of outcomes,
Yeah.
which then, there is no roadmap of how you get to those outcomes. There's no information on how the engagement and the design process has happened. And when we start seeing the spirit really be adopted by the stakeholders of these projects, it's when they're going through the process. They are talking to Embers about what opportunities they have. Embers is saying what their capacity is. And there's a conversation and a partnership happening that is an outcome that is hard to measure, right? That's a qualitative outcome. That's a partnership, and that's a relationship that sustains past the project and creates kind of a life of its own, right? Beyond the doors opening on a construction project. And that is piece of CBAs, right? We want to meet certain hiring targets and procurement targets, but we also want to contribute to an ecosystem that has capacity for future projects to go above and beyond what we're setting our outcomes are. And the process is about that, and that's that piece I think you're speaking to, Marcia, of, how do we build those relationships and understand that spirit between stakeholders that are involved and can benefit from these agreements. We do have some questions in the chat. So we've got one for the panelists. What do you see as barriers between being motivated and developing policy and actually actioning process? Lots of organizations get stuck with the actual doing. What kills the momentum? Tim is already engaged in the comments, so you're going first.
I will share a story briefly, but I will protect the innocent in this story. So I'm aware of a large municipal government that went through a big process with Bisocial Canada and have a great social procurement policy. I think it's awesome. And they're hiring general contractors based on their ability to deliver social impact in the local community. I think that's awesome. It's a great opportunity for general contractors to differentiate themselves. And then I also know that, with some of the challenges around interest rates and construction costs rising, and those same municipal owners, when they get into the project execution after the general contractor's been hired, there's like, nah, this social procurement stuff, I don't know. Yeah, we're not going to do it on this job. And I've seen it die several times. And that is a leadership thing. And it's one thing to have great social procurement policies. It's another thing for those policies to go to the graveyard once it hits the project execution teams. Because fundamentally, doing this does require a little bit more effort from your project management groups. You have to actually do some stuff. And so that to me is a leadership conversation that goes all the way up to mayor and council and city managers. And we should do what we said we were going to do, right?
Yeah, that's why that mandate is so fundamental, and it being strong and clear with what they want to see happen and how. Jordan, do you want to speak to, as far as you're at the project management level, and what's that like to be receiving that mandate and going to implement it?
Yeah, and I was going to tag on too. I would say the kind of the question at the end there is get stuck with the actual doing. What kills the momentum? Well, what kills the momentum is maybe lack of awareness and the leadership piece, like Tim alluded to. And so we're here to try and raise awareness. I think everybody on this call is in some form raising awareness or already agreed to take part in this. And we're trying to bring it out to a broader audience. And so the leadership component is the next thing. And so we talked about contract types and project types and that sort of thing. And so I think the awareness and the leadership from the greater group and just continuing to push it. And if, be comfortable being uncomfortable. It is a little bit of a newer, I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, but yeah, continue to push it, continue to work with the group and work with the ownership group and partners like Bisocial and make it comfortable and push past the uncomfortable side of things.
Yeah, I just agree. I completely agree with what you're saying. And I think awareness is really important. I'm just thinking about an experience that I won't mention anything, but where there is, I mentioned this earlier, there's a real disconnect between, I guess, the buy-in at the top, which may not be the real buy-in with a great champion, and the actual implementation at the site level. As we've discovered that people at the site level, who are making decisions around hiring and that sort of thing, actually are unaware, completely unaware that they're even in a community benefit agreement. So there's a very bad disconnect here, and maybe it's because we're getting to the spirit of it again. There isn't that true commitment and motivation. And sometimes when you have a mandate, it can be something to incentivize, but it can also be something that people feel just going to get around it, or just that kind of thing. So somehow it's got to be presented in a way that is exciting, and that the people, there has to be that champion and leadership that goes all the way down, because these are big projects and it gets really messed up along the way. There's a big chain of command along the way there.
Yeah, totally. We've got a question here just about, in addition to being a question of leadership, isn't there a cost concern? So when it comes to spending taxpayer money, aren't municipalities still weighing price more heavily than social procurement policies and programs? So I can speak to that. From my Social Canada's experience, we're working with a lot of municipalities on understanding the difference between lowest cost and best value, and really looking at the economic argument and the calculation of what really is what the best savings choice. And what we see is, when we explain that, is when you think about a municipality's goals, it's to increase employment, reduce poverty, to have all of these social policies. And when we align that with the social procurement and CBAs, we can see that within the current needs for goods and services, we can create more value than just economic value, and actually contribute to some of the social policy outcomes that they're looking for. So we're seeing a trend. There's so many municipalities increasing in interest in social procurement for that very reason, because it's an argument that feels a bit, it feels apolitical, right? It is the best way to spend taxpayer money, because it's the best value. No one can really deny that. I'm sure all of us have purchased the lowest cost item once in a while and it breaks right away. And then we have to buy again. So it's twice the cost. Also, when we talk about municipalities and wanting to create jobs, you think about Embers. They are hiring people that the city is actively working to try to get in the employment stream. And Embers is doing a lot of the behind the scenes work to support them in that employment, whereas the municipalities and the construction sector are hiring them for their services, which is labor on sites. And so it's two pieces that come together to create even more value. So yes, cost is a conversation, I would say, but it's changing dramatically, especially when we implore municipalities to look at the true value of the goods and services that they're tendering. We've got.
Charlotte,
Yeah, go ahead,
I want to
Tim.
jump in on that one too. So for sure, like the municipalities, the provinces, the feds, they all bear the cost, and we as taxpayers bear the cost of the social support network. And so if you have an at-risk youth who's in that system, the numbers that I've seen is it costs government couple $200,000 per person to be in that system. And if we can have an intervention with that person and give them a job as a laborer to start in construction, they're going to make $55,000 a year, and they're going to pay tax into the system. So maybe we should think through that adventure. But even if you just discount that, I can tell you from my experience as the president of a large contractor, there is no premium capital cost for doing this. What this fundamentally is you break up scopes of work and you give them to smaller BIPOC-owned businesses, and they have lower overheads, lower cost to serve, and you will save money. The only way that you'll save money, though, is if you use a collaborative delivery method where you get the benefit of those savings up front before you flip it to a fixed price later on. So I actually think that you save net probably a couple points potentially by actually doing this to the full extent possible. And then there are some questions in the chat about, what checks and balances are there for contractors to actually do what they said they were going to do, public disclosure, all that stuff. I'm a huge fan of, in the context of a collaborative delivery method, you could take $100,000 or $200,000 of your construction manager's fee and you can put it at risk based on them actually doing what they said they were going to do. And as soon as you tie money to it, it magically happens and it gets done. I'm also a huge fan of public disclosure of how project teams are doing relative to the goals, provided that the goals at the beginning of the project were not shoved down the team's throat. They were collaboratively developed based on this, like, what's the capacity in the market? And then you tie people's money to it and fees to it, and you report on it on a monthly basis. And I know that Biosocial actually provides a service for verifying these things as a third party. So all of that stuff, I think, is figured out. It's just a matter of making it happen on projects.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Tim. I think, public reporting is pretty powerful. And I agree tying money to projects, but say if it's a small project and you're trying to figure out what that stick is going to look like, at a very baseline, public reporting to community, and Marcia can speak to this, community is loud, and community and the business community will bark back if targets aren't met, and get involved when they need to be able to keep projects accountable. Jordan, were you going to say something? Oh, no. Okay.
No,
Sorry to put
you
you on
got
the spot there. Okay. We have probably time for one more question. Um, let's see. Tim, sorry to put you on the spot again, but I know with your experience, this question is going to resonate. And Jordan, actually, it sounds like there's great things being done with First Nations. Any experience with projects that include both local First Nations and Inuit, Métis, and urban Indigenous?
Yeah, I took that as all Indigenous peoples together in one project. So um, when there is a community benefit agreement and there's an expectation around we want to provide opportunity for at-risk Indigenous youth, I would include in that bucket First Nations, Métis, and Inuit as all together. If the question is, are there projects where those three groups are like the lead proponents and there's three of them as user groups in the same building? There's lots of examples of that across Canada. One comment that I would make, this whole community benefit agreement thing is very, a better way to say this, an impact benefit agreement or an Indigenous benefit agreement that's very common in the energy business. It's been around forever. That is the same thing as a community benefit agreement. It's just focused on Indigenous people. And so many of the principles that we're talking about in broader CBAs come straight out of the Indigenous advocacy world.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, we're really getting down to the wire here. In one sentence, maybe two, what's kind of your final piece of advice that you would give to project owners, GCs, or anyone who is looking to incorporate community benefits in construction? Marcia, do you want to go first?
Sure. I guess I've said this again, and I'll say it again. Commit to the spirit. Go positive. Don't think this is going to be a negative drag, because in fact it's been proven the opposite. And that the business isn't separate from community. Community and business partnerships can do the world of good for everybody. And so it's an overarching commitment to doing business for good.
Amazing. Thanks, Marcia. Tim, because I know you have a hard stop.
Yeah, I just think you gotta communicate from the heart. You gotta tell stories about how you're changing people's lives and why we're doing this. We're not doing it because it's red tape and we're getting forced to because of some policy from the ivory towers. We're doing it because we want to change people's lives. And here's a way to do that at zero premium cost.
Okay, Jordan.
Yep, and tagging on to that, be authentic. And I said it earlier, but be comfortable with the uncomfortable. I think we're the leaders in the initiative, and we want to continue to push this. And there are some hard conversations, but there's other scenarios and other people that we're trying to benefit. So I'll leave with that.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us for this hour. Thank you to our panelists for helping me share the space to not bore everyone with just me talking for an hour straight. I really appreciate you for being here and sharing your expertise from all sectors and all different types of projects. Once again, I implore everyone on the call to go check out our resources, not just the guide. We've got so many free resources on our website. And if you have any questions or any questions we didn't get to, please email me, charlotte@bisocialcanada.com, and we can set up a chat, or we can do a little email back and forth for some answers. But yeah, everyone stay connected, and great. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest.